Well, thank you for checking out Public Finance Conversations. This time we're joined by Bonnie Moss, who I'd first like to say thank you, Bonnie, for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Bonnie Moss is someone that I've worked with a lot of school districts, and I've really enjoyed doing so. I'm hoping we can start off the public finance conversation with Bonnie talking a bit about her career. So, Bonnie, if you wouldn't mind, how did it all get started and where are you today?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it makes you stop and think, okay, how did I really get here? And as my dad used to say, everything you've done before was training for what you're doing now, and everything you're doing now is training for what is yet to come in your future. And I think I'm a real living example of that. I grew up in a household of very active community participants and global thinkers, and we need to shape our community to be the way we want it to be, and developed an early interest in politics for sure, and found myself just constantly moving to more and more political things. And then when I went to college, I majored in urban studies. So I was always looking at the politics of communities and doing internships and things like that that were really about community building. And then, surprise, surprise, moved into careers that were about community and community relations and building relationships that would create win-win futures with the companies that I worked with. So even though I was on the private sector side, working for a big energy utility and then a garbage and recycling utility, both of them major Fortune 500 companies, there was a lot of politics involved in those environmental service firms that required building relationships with community. And so I did that for a long time and really, I would say, sharpened my skills, if you will, on how to help people come together to resolve political challenges, and just found that I loved it. I loved the strategy of it. I loved doing it. And so that became my passion. And along the way, I also ran for school board as a young community invested businesswoman. And who knew, but that became huge training for what I'm doing now. So I served as an elected member of a local school board and I did that for 8 years. And so that was also really good training. And that led me, all of that community experience led me to political consulting. And so about 20 years ago, I got into political consulting, and it's been almost 10 years now that I've owned my own political consulting firm with a business partner and now a second. So we own a firm called Clifford Moss, and we're doing great community work around the state of California. So it's been a journey, but a really interesting one, and a one that I am constantly learning on. And I think even though I often describe myself as the old dog in the room,
Oh, God.
I see myself as constantly learning. When you see yourself as a learner, you tend to be, more fresh moving through whatever challenges are coming at you.
Well, Bonnie, you may be older in age than some of the people you're working with, but as far as energy goes, you are just out of college as far as that goes. And that is a very valuable
Woo-hoo!
thing in what we do. So I
Yeah.
get the community involvement. I get that's a part of your family history and which is ingrained in you. But why the school board? Why run for a school board?
Oh, that's a great question. So when that opportunity came up for me, I described myself as a young, socially responsible, very community active businesswoman who wanted to just make the world better and wanted to make the community better. And I came from a family of educators. Both my parents were teachers, and so suddenly there I am doing community work in the community, and people came to me and said, "We need you to run for school board. There's an opening and you got to do it." And of course I was a lot younger and newer than I am now. And I said, okay. I didn't even really think about what that really meant. But I got connected with really good people, and I did not have any bad habits in terms of campaigning or my perception of what it meant to run for school board. I was young, unmarried, a renter, no kids, so that kind of put me in a different category. But I worked harder than everybody else, and I got elected. And then what I found was it was a real opportunity to learn how to improve student achievement from this policy making place where really you might say it's really hard to have an impact. When you're in a classroom and you're teaching kids, you can have an impact. But I learned that my real job on a school board is bringing people together to find a common agreement about solving problems and making things move forward. So very interesting.
Wanting from prior conversations as you're running for the school board, my understanding is you did a lot of listening, and that's something that you've carried through to what you do today. Was that a big part of you running for that position?
I will say that's a great observation. Listening has turned out to be a great skill that has produced terrific dividends wherever I've really taken that deliberate philosophy and approach and put it to work. And yes, I first learned that when I was running for school board, and I got some really good advice about spend more time listening than talking. And it turned out that a lot of my competitors felt that their job was to pontificate and to have all the answers. Whereas because of the good advice I got, I did not move into that experience with all the answers. And I spent a lot more time asking folks, what do you think? What do you believe? What are you seeing? And apparently that was very refreshing for them. And so I could see that. And plus it was a great learning tool. So over the years, I just have kept using that, and it's turned out to be really, really useful. It's just to learn how to be a good listener.
Good. Well, I think as we get into what you're doing now, that listening has definitely been a career-long thing that you've done. But how did you get into from school board where you run as a individual every 4 years to saying, I need way more of that. Let me do it every 2 years and let me do like 20 at a time into communication/political consulting?
Great question. So as I said, I had always had this interest in political activity. And the more political and community work I did, the more I saw that communications was a key element of success. When you look at successful organizations that put a measure on the ballot and win, and you really study those organizations, the most successful groups are effective at communicating. And so I learned early on, what is it that moves people from A to B? What is it that attracts thousands of people, we call them voters, to vote yes on something? It's when you take these complicated issues and potentially complicated ballot measures and make them easy for people to understand. And so what I found was I loved it. I was pretty good at it. And I also found that every community is unique. Every client is unique. So it's really not a cookie cutter concept. There are some universal truths with every ballot measure or every communications project, but then there is the every community is unique factor, and the listening is a lost art factor, and the people support what they help create factor. So you put all these universal truths together that are really part of a strategic way of thinking, a strategic philosophy, and it makes the work very, very interesting. So I find that I actually love doing many of these same kind of communications projects, but doing them with a slightly different flavor and theme as I go every year.
And so, Bonnie, you just did something that I was going to ask you about, and that is you take what could be 3 or 4 paragraphs and you turn it into a phrase. Is that something you strove towards, or is that just something that you just have always naturally done?
That's a great question. I mean, people tease me about that. You tease me, others tease me. But, I have found different people have different learning styles. And so when you're in the business, as we are, of making complicated things simpler or telling a story in a certain way that connects with people, you've got to find shortcuts, and there are different ways to do that. And I think over the years, what I found was my Bonnieisms turned out to be something that helped me create a shortcut that when I would say that, when I would say a certain thing a certain way, that people would go, they would instantly get it, and they'd be like, okay, let's move on. And so, like you've heard me say many times, do we have a short runway or a long runway? Or you're coming in for a landing on this process and you're about to take off on the runway on that process. And without going into explaining what all that means, there's sort of an instant understanding. Okay, I get that you're talking about one process coming to an end and another one taking off. So that's an example. It just has turned out to work well, and it's tapping my creativity, hopefully.
Well, Bonnie, it doesn't just represent your clients well. I think I've learned from you in that when our company used to talk about itself, it would take 20 PowerPoint slides to say what film and roll-up is. And working with you and just kind of thinking about things, we boiled it down to 3 things: experience, integrity, service. If your slide is not centered on one of those things, or if your elevator pitch is not on one of those 3 things, it can be cut. And so I think you've helped people not only in their campaigns or communication, but people like me think that same way. And so you sort of had an influence outside that immediate area that you've been trying to influence.
Wow. And I must say that I love your choice of your three descriptors, because they're very true in my experience working with Fieldman Roll-Up.
Great. Well, thank you. Bonnie, tell us about Clifford Moss with an upside down eye.
That's great. So I wish I had a copy. Let's see here. Maybe I can go to one of my business cards and just show it for people to see. There it is.
Good. We see it. That's an upside down eye.
There it is. There's the upside down eye. So when we were building our new firm, it was just 2 of us at the time, myself and my business partner, Tom Clifford. And we talked about our vision, and we realized we complemented each other. And we sat down with our designer and said, this is who we are, and this is what we're doing. And he came back with Clifford Moss with an upside down eye. And you'll also notice, here I am again, there's a period at the end of our logo. So it's Clifford Moss, period. And so we were like, okay, that's intriguing. What is that about? And he said, well, you're very, you complement each other well. You've got the Bonnie side, which is very meticulous, very thorough, right down to punctuating correctly what's happening. And then you've got the Tommy factor, which is come in and be a provocateur and throw it upside down. And so that's why we've got the treatment of the eye in Clifford upside down. Well, the funny part of this story is we're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And first time I saw it, I said, oh, what a cool exclamation point. That's speaking to our enthusiasm. And so that's how I interpreted it. But then as we went along in our career and with the firm, I would generally find 2 different kinds of responses when people would see the logo. There would be the one crowd that would say, oh, I love that exclamation point in the middle of your logo. And we'd be like, yeah, we're really enthusiastic. We love what we do. We have a lot of passion. And then there was another category of people who would go, excuse me, but I don't know if you have a typo in your logo. Your eye is upside down. I would always laugh because those people were people who were super meticulous. They were like the number cruncher, and they would be so respectful, but they would be kind of very quiet and very slow and say, I just want to pull you aside. You got a typo. And I would say, well, actually, that's deliberate. And I so appreciate, but it would tell me how they saw things. Were they a sort of life enthusiast, and did they go, oh, I love that exclamation point? Or were they someone who is a reformer and we like quality work product and you've got a typo? And we would explain that to them. And it's really been fun all the way through. It's been a lot of fun because we learn about people depending on how they respond to our logo.
That's good. That's a great story. I think I need to reach out to your marketing person because we have like a film and arrow thing, but I don't think any of us know quite what it means. It's definitely a logo, but we have no idea what it means. But you know what your name and your design means, and I think that's a valuable thing.
We do. And one other thing I would say is we have a tagline, and our tagline is "Let us tell your story." And what we've learned over time is that, everyone really loves a great story. And if we can understand a client, usually, as you know, we're working with many different kinds of public agencies that have complexity, usually have difficult things they need to explain. Oftentimes they're headed for a local revenue measure, but they've got a story to tell. And the question is, are they going to fall into caverns of minutia and like get into really boring discussion of what they're dealing with? Or are they going to piece together a story that attracts interest and attention and support and passionate people who say, I support this agency? And so we found that the tagline, "Let us tell your story," has also been a really useful descriptor for us.
So that is definitely a tagline that I've heard, but one that doesn't come to mind immediately when I think of Clifford Moss. The one that comes to mind immediately is listening is a lost art. You say that first and more frequently, and then you say, let me tell your story. Is that correct?
Yes, what we really strive to tell everyone that we work with is we have 3 core beliefs. So that listening is a lost art is one of our 3 core beliefs. We also strive to help them understand that we really do believe that every community is unique. And we find that our clients want to be understood as a unique entity. So every community is unique. Listening is a lost art. And then a belief system that I learned very early on is people support what they help create. People support what they help create. And people seem to like that. So you can't move communities in big numbers to the yes column by just dictating to them how things have to work. You really need to build relationships and involve people in the process of building a shared vision. And that's why we say people support what they help create. Right in there with listening.
Well, Bonnie, I want to talk about the first time we met, and I think it's a story worth our audience it's worth telling to our audience, and they might enjoy. Bonnie was working at a company, and one of the representatives there did a great presentation. Our CEO at the time said, "Adam, you want to do more schools? You need to go talk with this guy." Spoke with him. He said, "You need to talk to Bonnie." So I arranged for our chairman, Larry Rolap, to go with me up to Oakland. I have your address. It's before iPhones. Well, some people might have had iPhones, but they weren't real popular. And no Uber, no Lyft. And we get off BART and we're trying to find this address. Taxi driver's kind of lost. He's not quite figuring out this address. And Larry's looking at me like, Bauer, are you sure you have this thing right here? Because we look like we're in a residential neighborhood.
All coming back to me.
The taxi driver stops, says, "This is it." And we get out, and before we can figure out whether we have the right location, the taxi driver's gone. Right? Larry's looking at me like, son, you better have this thing figured out because this does not seem like a good outcome. And so I go knocking on this residential door. They let us in. I said, I'm here to see Bonnie Moss. I get led up to the master bedroom and have a seat. And Bonnie shows up. I eventually have a great conversation with you. Larry calms down, says everything's good. This is a great group of people. We go to the kitchen, meet a few other people, go to another bedroom, meet a few other people, and then we're on our way. Tell us about this, because I think when you started Clifford Moss, you went with that same mindset. Like, let's forget the corporate office. Let's do residential office.
Oh yeah. There's some people who like, I got to be in a corporate looking office. It really speaks to who we are. In our case, I think a lot of the people who've been in our line of work really want to affiliate with the community. So who knew, but oftentimes it turns out there we are running our business out of what looks like a house. Now, I might add to you, I know you thought you were going into the bedroom, the master bedroom, but you were going into offices. They had office furniture in them.
They did.
So I just want our viewers to know we weren't like doing business out of a bedroom. But it turns out that there are a lot of folks who do what we do, and they're working out of what is commonly called as an independent little residential unit. And they're right there in the community. So they're not in a business park. They're not in the industrial sector. We're in the heart of the community. And yes, as it turns out, Clifford Moss has gone through that. And I might add, Adam, I was thinking about not only that meeting, and I know we talked about it, but other times when I was first getting to know you, I remember what stood out for me about you was that you were driving like 1,200 miles a week. And
That's
I
my
remember
house.
we were talking about it and you're like, oh, I'm on the road. I'm on the road. I'm like, well, what do you mean you're on the road? Oh, I'm driving 1,200 miles a week. I'm like, a week? I was doing 1,200 a month. I was getting on planes fairly often, but you were driving all over the state of California, and you were doing it all the time, every day, every week, weren't you?
Yeah, well, until COVID-19, yes. But I drove so much. We actually have like a printer set up in my trunk. So I have like, I could hit, I could pull up to the school district parking lot, hit print, get the stapler, and it's all
There you
Bluetooth.
be.
I'm all set, right? But that is really like my office, is be able to work out of my car and be in front of our clients, which is very important to them, and it's very important to us to have that level of contact with them.
And I would just add, just as I was learning about listening and about the uniqueness of every community, you were, I think, what I saw in you was this learning and this becoming more and more earnestly there for your clients.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. One thing I'd say about you, Bonnie, is you work very hard for your clients, and you are in there and you care and you want to do this right for them. Is this something that is related just to clients, or do you adopt this to a lot of areas of your life that you just dive in and roll your sleeves up every time?
Great question. I think if I had a circle of my Bonnie supporters around me, they would tell you that my work has been my life passion, and because I love it, and I learn and I grow and I meet great people like you and many others, that I am just all in. I'm all in. So whatever is happening, I'm all in. And usually when we get to the campaign side of things, as you know, we're all in a very, very short compressed time. And so that gets me even more energized. I find the process to be just really energizing. And the process of, we have a philosophy that we apply at Clifford Moss: facilitate, train, coach. And so that process becomes, I get all passionate about it. And, if you can see people learning and coming along, you're making a difference. So it's sort of an iterative process that happens, that the sheer loving of it makes me want to work harder, and seeing the clients do better and accomplish more makes me want to work harder. So it's very, very iterative, I would say, and fun.
Well, Bonnie, one thing I think we're also finding is we used to think of GeoBond elections as something you did every 10 years. And with the state funding, the way that works, with some of the legal requirements in the GeoBond measures, some of the tax rate restrictions, I think we're now in an environment where it could be every 4 or 6 years that a school district is looking at doing a GeoBond measure. And I think you've really started thinking about how is communication a daily activity versus an every 10-year activity. Could you talk to us a bit about that?
Sure. I completely agree with you on what we're seeing over time. And I will say that the process of preparing for it, and especially moving through that election window to pass a GEO bond, is consuming. And so what we traditionally would see over time is that because it's consuming, it is also in many ways exhausting for folks. So when they pass a bond, they get to the end of that process and they go, oh, great, now I can chill out. Not exactly, because now with this new process of every 4 to 6 years, the best and the brightest have understood this notion of we got to keep communicating as we go. And instead of there being 2 phases to the process, a preparation phase and a campaign phase, we now see 3. So there's still the preparation phase and the campaign phase, but the third process is now, once you've passed a bond, how do you honor your commitment to the voters and do what you said you were going to do and communicate about it? And to those organizations that actually communicate well about what's happening and how are they honoring the commitments they've made to their communities, we find that the next time they need to go back to voters and ask for support, they actually have an easier time of it because they have been communicating all along. So that is a big piece of what we try to teach now, is that this is a continuum. We are also building a new line of business for us, which is non-electoral strategic communications work, which we're finding that there's really an interest out there because for more and more school districts, there are more and more issues that are complex and complicated and need attention in terms of how are you going to make this very complicated topic simpler for people to understand, and how can that integrate into the bigger issue of your reputation. And why does that matter? Because you don't know exactly when you're going to need to go back to your voters for some sort of support, authorization, or yes vote. And so there's a lot to work with in school districts, public school districts.
Well, Bonnie, you are framing this all geared up towards an election, and there's certainly value to that. But if the community understands how hard a lot of these school districts are working and a lot of the good that they're doing, it might just make for a happier community to be able to have that level of communication out there.
I totally agree. And in fact, as I said, we're now working with a few school districts where I want to say the very enlightened leadership, including the school board, the locally elected school board, has heard from their community that they need to communicate more effectively. And they have sought us out as a strategic advisor to help them communicate more effectively. And it is making a difference. We're hearing people say, wow, I didn't think that the school district would ever change the way it communicates. And I see that you are making an effort now. You are listening. You are understanding the value of listening. You are understanding the value of people support what they help create. So we provide some structure, some infrastructure, some great strategies and tools for that. And I think where we're working, it's making a difference.
Well, Bonnie, thank you for sharing so much about your career and what you've seen change over time. Would you mind just telling us a bit about your family?
Family, yes. When I am in my copious free time. So here's the deal. I am a free spirit. I am not married and I don't have children, but I have wonderful family and friends in my circle. I'm very close to my siblings, and I'm the spoiling aunt in the family. So I get to take the kids and bring them under my wing and have lots of fun with them, and then I hand them back to their parents. And that does extend. You and I talked about this the other day. That extends to a number of really close friends who also have kids, including my wonderful business partner, Tom Clifford.
Yes.
So I'm lucky for that. And then as I said, I have wonderful friends that are an extended family for me. So I'm blessed, and I'm really happy with both my work and my home life.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing about your family as well. This is, as we start to wrap up here, I like to point out some reasons why I chose each of the guests. And Bonnie, you are one of the few people that I feel that can walk into a room and energize it, but also organize things. So it's not just like this whirlwind that comes in and kind of leaves it a mess. You bring that energy, you get everyone moving, but then you have structures in place that you help guide what those next steps are. Those are two unique traits that for one person to have, and I think that's a real compliment. We've already talked about how hard you work and how much you care about your clients. And I really appreciate that and what you've done for our clients and many others, just for education throughout the state of California. Another thing that you've taught me is to listen first. I think there's a lot of times where a lot of us want to jump in, and we know a lot about our industry. We know a lot about our field, and people have asked us to come talk to them about those things. And so you're sometimes in nature, or your inclination is to jump in and start talking and offer ideas, but taking that step back to say, let's hear from you first. Listening is a lost art. I think has been a very valuable tool. And then Bonnie, as a person, you're just one of my favorite people out there. So those are a few things I wanted to say about you as we wrap up here.
Thank you. And the feeling is very mutual, Adam. You know that I get so much good feeling out of the clients that we work with together. I think we're doing a lot of good work out there in California.
Great. Well, thanks again, Bonnie.
Thank you. It's been fun.